My work is never a fist in the hand, and it's not your typical poster. It's not look at me, think what I do this. It's never about that. It's some way to try to get people to come in, make meaning themselves, think their own thoughts, come to their own conclusions. I came, actually CalArts brought me out here. I'd been living and working in Italy. I was there for May '68, and the painting of the Politecnico Red. It was a wonderful time because we were very optimistic about change. Right. And in that there is that optimism now with the Occupy movement. It both is re-stimulating those memories for those of us who have them, and I think it's inspiriting the younger generation to see what you can do by modeling a kind of process. It's not so much about being left as it is that my imagination was completely captivated by participatory democracy, and to look for design and art making that could, or image making, that could represent that idea. Coming from the East, where so much is scripted, to come to Los Angeles, where so much was not scripted, made it really possible to do things the way that I wanted to do them. The first thing I made was this shrink wrap poster. It says, if the designer is going to make a contribution to society, that's a big mistake, he. I didn't write the text, Richard Farson did, but I liked the text except for that he in there. I'm sure we could reconstruct that sentence. It didn't have to have a he. But at any rate, it said you have to know about ecology, human behavior, but taste and style just aren't enough. I really believe that there has to be real content, and that content has to be meaningful to you who make it and worth saying, or don't make it. There had been a group called Super Studio who were architects in Milan who did a series of cautionary tales about the future, and they also did one optimistic one. The cautionary tales are far more articulate because you really see like New York City of brains, only left over our brains, all in their own capsule, isolated from each other, all stacked up and some kind of thing. So they made these images, and then they made another one in which there's a landscape of a grid, a perspective grid, in which sort of two people with long hair, indeterminate sexuality, are walking into the future, and they wrote that grid was the equal distribution of goods and services. So for me, that kind of perspective grid that you see in the Women in Design poster is really, for me, references back the equal distribution of goods and services. But only people who know about Super Studio look at that poster and say, doesn't that have something to do with Super Studio? Da, da, da. I said, yes, but you happen to know about Super Studio. If you don't, it's a grid, it's a perspective. Right. I think most of the things in that poster are unstable signs, because unless you know the moon is Angelica Kaufman's painting of design inspired by poetry, but unless you know that painting, that rondo, you see it's two women sort of very classically dressed, sitting together, having a conversation. There's a lot in it, but I think if you look at it, you see a landscape. And you see a moon, because it's the phases of the moon, and you see eye bolts moving in the landscape, and you see a bunch of palm trees there. So you could make your own story in a way out of that would be different than the story I tell myself about what I'm doing. There were other interpretations. I heard through the grapevine when it was put up at the Architectural League in New York that Massimo Vignelli thought that strong women were taking over. He saw it as like women marching toward him, kind of thing. I had none of my intention. I actually didn't think even about strength when it came to this, because if you don't glue the nut on it, it'll work itself off of it. So you have to glue it if you want it to stay there. We had a what you would now call a continuing education program. The kind of classes that you couldn't get to teach in the schools that people were working, and also things that people wanted to learn about, filmmaking, writing, and that was going on from the beginning of the Grandview Women's Building. I was interested in finding out what women free to investigate what part of what they make has to do with them being women, that they're free to do that themselves, and for that to then be reflected in what they make, and be able to reach an audience beyond just the everyday audience. It was to help each woman do the thing she wanted to do the way she wanted to do it, only to facilitate that, not to in any way shape that. Mm-hmm. And only if someone asked for some technical help or any kind of help, then that we would give it. And that was the nature of the kind of collaboration and collectivity, because it's not about doing everything together. I really believe in that idea that the individual voices of the people of society have to be heard, especially the people who haven't been heard. And this was a chance to be heard through the things you made. It's actually a very recent thing that women are, it's gendered as a color, that a female child is designated pink and a boy child blue, but that's not a very old tradition, so it's an unstable thing. But that is the color that is assigned this gender, and when groups, it's a fact of organization that often groups have something in common, come together and take what's used to put you down and turn it upside down and make it four. So to the extent that pink is so delicate and recessive, to take it on and make it a meaningful thing. The American Institute of Graphic Arts asked 100 people to do something on a color. So I did it on pink. And I made, it had to be 30 inches square, so I got a bunch of square pieces of paper and gave them out to women at the Women's Building, but also to my friend Diane. And Diane went and extended the activity of gathering by asking 3 teenagers, like 12 and 13 years old, 1 boy and 2 girls, what they thought pink meant. And so that's on there, and then different people wrote what pink meant to them. So it opened up the question, put pink as a color designating a gender into question, but from different people's perspective. And I thought that the empty ones, the ones that didn't have everything in it, people would write in themselves, or at least it signified that there's still many other people who might come at this idea from another perspective. That trying to figure out how to make things open to everyone, available to everyone. The grid sort of continued to have that meaning for me. Lucy Lepard wrote about it in an article on political posters. So it made me cry. I was so touched that she knew it was political, because there's such a bias. And damn it, this is the second time I've been on television. And I'm sorry that I feel crying on television, but it was just so touching that someone sees something as political that's not constructed the way political posters usually are, with a statement that you either buy into or not. Because the statement is really the color. And it's really not a statement, it's for your responses to it. It's an open thing, the way that I think the Occupy movement has that kind of openness, and that she knew that it was political. Just actually, when someone knows what you're doing without you having to tell them, it is so terrific, absolutely terrific. I think there are things that are political that have a different kind of tone. That's the tone of engagement through questions and through a conversation. Like you say something and someone else says something you didn't expect, and then the conversation goes somewhere you didn't expect it to go. And to leave the unpredicted to happen is really what I love about art. And how to say that visually and then have people get it is not so easy. You can say it, but it doesn't mean that people get it. When the original went to New York, I asked one of my students from Cal Arts who had moved to New York, I said, could you go to the Whitney Museum and tell me what people are saying in front of my work? And he said the interesting thing was that there were a lot of people in front of it, because they got into a conversation. And that really, that's what I wanted. Most of my work is about time, to take time to think things through, take time to talk to someone else, to take time to talk to someone who you don't know anything about, just accepting how that person's right to be a person and find out about them. Trying to make things be more of that kind of thing. And if you've got to get it across in 2 seconds, it's just not going to be that kind of thing. This will never work as a billboard. It's just not going to happen in a billboard. Where I think even the quick read that comes from looking at the one with the eyeballs can lead to the wrong conclusions, because you're not taking the time to think about what the other parts, what the whole is saying. I want it to be open. I want that openness, and I think that's what an open society should be. How do you tell you want an open society? What's the way to say that? You know, and this is what I was trying to say, but I never really know for sure that it's getting across. I don't want to be at the center of a thing. I want there to be this field in which we all have a part, and we all have something good. And that's the way I thought of the Women's Building as a place. So I don't even use the word collaborative or collective for it. It's really more to create a location for participation, to create a location where people feel a comfort and feel accepted and can therefore be the best of who they are, or talk about what isn't so great also, and to try to work out their differences. I think that those are good things.